You know, I'm a big thinker. I think more than the average person does. And, I remember some of my best friends that was working around me, they couldn't cope with the amount of thinking I used to do and how many things I used to do at the same time. And I used to find it funny that they just couldn't keep up with me. But I was always miles ahead of everybody with everything I did. And that's what led me to be the person that led everybody else. Like, basically, people just follow me, right? And they learn from you. When you're someone who's extraordinary and you do things that's out of the ordinary and wild, you're living a crazy life compared to what we call normal people. And when you're one of those people that's a freak of nature and literally seen as a freak of nature, it comes with a title, a lot of titles, and titles that most people never, ever, ever create, and create by word of mouth on the streets. And, like, we go through life with good and bad, good and evil. We face things ourselves, and sometimes we do the things we don't really like ourselves. And sometimes we live in denial about it. But I've never lived in denial about bad things I've done. I've always had a bad guilt factor, right? Always had a bad guilt factor. And guilt always got me, because at the end of the day, you are your own worst enemy, right? And you learn that through life. It's your decisions that you make that you're responsible for that leads you into whatever situation you're in. You have to take responsibility for your own action, no matter what the circumstances are. And when people can't do that, it doesn't lead down the right path, I can guarantee that. We learn through suffering, we learn through being rejected, we learn through 1,000 different things in life. And I certainly met my means, and I certainly met my bad times. I was rejected as a child, as a freak of nature, because I had abilities no one had. And when you tell your mother about the worst moment in her life in 1945, right, when you're 5 years old, 15 years before you're born, you're seen as a freak of nature. And people can't cope with certain things when you know things they don't. Mental telepathy, ESP, remote and telekinesis, levitation, spoon bending, clock winding, folding space and time with deja vu, and predict the future and prevent what's going to happen. You go in a time where time stands still, and you go in the past and the future with dimensional thinking. And that used to be a universal, right, language that we all had. Some people can use their genetic memory and their genetic ancestry to us because they're not trapped with amnesia. And most people don't believe they have amnesia, but they all do. They just don't know. When you have amnesia, you don't know. Crossing back over in your primordial state, back in your spirituality, back in your celestial primordial state, you control your business from the outside in instead of the inside out. You're not trapped in your mind, in mentality, in a personality where you don't know who you are and you don't know how to use your tools. And when you're called the freak of nature, it's because people they can't understand you. They can't understand you at all because they're trapped in their mind with IQ and only has a mental capacity with a psychological behavior, with an IQ, with evolution mutation and artificial intelligence and the grandmother's elect when they're engineered this way. When you think outside the mind, you can use 100% of your brain. But when you think inside your mind, you can only use up to 15% the highest genius in the world. And that's an understanding people have no comprehension or understanding of. And when you're one of a kind that has all these abilities with the most powerful combination on earth, imagine being in my shoes, because it's really difficult. But see, I am the way I am. And it's the way I've always been, right? And it was pretty hard coming through this world when nearly everybody works against you without realizing what they're really doing to themselves and not understanding the capacity they have themselves within their own DNA. Because it's in dormancy. They have amnesia, I don't. And when you go through life trapped in your own mind thinking the way that you do, and you're being told by people around the world that you're a freak of nature, you're an idiot, you're mental, whatever, you kind of believe in it. You think there's something wrong with you, and you're the oddball, and you think everyone else is right, and you've got to be wrong because you're the only one. So you must be wrong. And that's a conclusion you constantly come to no matter what happens to you. You think there's something wrong with you, but there isn't. You're the one of a kind that can do things they can't do. And it takes a long time to go through that ladder, Jacob's ladder, and stick your head through the light in the tunnel. Okay, Plato describes this in 15 books. And there isn't too many people in the world that can use their natural selection in life and their natural order with dimensional thinking, remote viewing, deja vu, to predict the future and prevent what's going to happen. It means I see the future and I'm never wrong. And that's scary for most. They can't deal with it. They don't like knowing their future. They'd rather stay with amnesia. And therefore they can't prevent what's going to happen either, because they don't know. I tell you, it's been a tough walk. But something inspired me to make this video. Something different. I was watching a video with Will Smith, and Will Smith gave a speech about, you know, there comes a time where your rich and fame and your money, right, hits that place where none of it does anything for you anymore. And you've got to look for a high somewhere else because you can't get high anymore. And I've seen this with people with money, right, with material. When you consider my case and the people I work with, each person I work with in the top empires of the 7 most powerful networks in Australia, in the underground world, we were all convicted for giving away between 45 and over 90% of our money. Every one of us. And that's because these people that I knew, I was the smallest fish out of all of them. I was the one that came along and put them all together, and they looked up to me for other reasons, right? But the funny thing is, I may have stopped the violence and the gang killing and created the biggest adverse effect in Australia that Australia's ever seen, with the biggest mental health research and DNA studies done, and brought people back in their primal state to use 100% of their brain. We designed the drug that Christ has most used, called Bread Manna, you see in the movie Limitless, to use 100% of your brain and never suffer mental disorders and defects ever again. Cross over, think outside the mind, resurrect, go back in your primal state. The great resurrection humanity, we teach it. We're the most powerful tools on earth with the book Freedom by Jem McGivers. And we're not breathing program, the Holy Grail of life and the Holy Book of Life, brother. Because it crosses you over, right? To go for every rabbit hole to stick your head through the light in internal that Plato describes in 15 books, the greatest philosopher of all time. When you stick your head out of the cave, right, you have another ability that's outside the mind, beyond the mind. As Christ said, think outside the mind, follow my footsteps, go back to your childhood, and you can do what I can and more. Think about it, because we can. And most people deceive themselves inside their mind to believe they can't. And that's the placebo effect they create themselves with artificial intelligence, because it's encoded in their DNA. We have a genetic process with genetic memory, with answers to tools that can make us do these things. That's embedded in our own DNA, right, in the 24th chromosome, with supernatural, superhuman power, superhuman abilities. What we can do with Christ can be imposed on that bloodline DNA, and I'm solid, living evidence. And why would you not believe in that? Why wouldn't you? Just think about 99% of people, 99.9% of people chooses not to believe in it. They'd rather listen to their voice in mind that tells them otherwise, and therefore they'll never know. Because they're controlled by their own voices and their own truth, and come to their own conclusion with reasoning, with voice mind ultimately showing extinction that will prevent them from doing this, crossing over. You know, that's when you learn something. That the voices in everybody's mind, right, is the farthest worst enemy. When you can think instinctively outside the mind and you have natural abilities, you learn things about life that people can't comprehend. Pastors, preachers, and teachers and Christians are getting this part wrong as well, the crossover. And they don't even know what it is, because they're in their mind. And they all die prematurely from stress-related diseases because they're controlled by stress. If you die prematurely from stress-related diseases, and every single thing you suffer from is stress, it means you're controlled by stress no matter what you say. 600 to 6,000 defective genes in every single human being on Earth, in 98.7% of the whole human population, with their voltage, reliability, anti-clockwise in their aura and their DNA. And their body cells can corrupt during the daytime and can only be at night time for 3.5 hours. Only 1.3% of the world population can repair 24 hours a day with genetic process without mental disorders or gene defects. Going through a transformation, a natural selection in life, a natural order that's happening worldwide right now. Naturally selected with a natural order, right? By using a natural organic motor skills. But when they don't work and they're dormant, you have amnesia. So we put you through a 40-day process with the book Freedom by Jim McGivers, and we're not breathing program that recreates the sacred secretion to conduct with your body cells and recreate the sacred secretion with two monics of mentality and a natural selection of life, a natural order, right, to go clockwise. So you're not going anti-clockwise. And it's not what you think. The mind doesn't know, the mind doesn't understand. The mind's very complicated. The mind can only use 7 to 10% of the brain on average, and up to 15%. To use 100%, you have to think outside the mind. It's a universal connection you see in the movie Limitless, a vortex of information where sevenfold wisdom knowledge of people have no comprehension of, because they're not qualified to judge. No human being on earth is only a handful, the elect. They're the only ones that know this. And that's why they're the only ones that can teach people how to go back in the primal state with their sixth sense, as we're going into sixth mass extinction, stripping the sixth sense for the sixth time, and it's not a joke. It's sending animals round circles over the earth, birds falling out the sky, and magneto, right, through the shaman, the planet's changing. Fauna's collapsing between 38 and 90% nutrition value worldwide. Phi-beta bacteria is collapsing in 98.7% of the population, between 50 and 100%, and that's their immune system. And most of them avoid this, and they call the species in denial, because they don't believe what's happening to their body and your DNA. They can't handle the truth, and can't really face it, and can't really deal with it. You know, we knew this in 99, and trust me when I say that most people in the whole world is a species in denial. They can only handle so much truth. They can only handle so many rabbit holes, and they stop in a comfort zone, and that's as far as they get. They never stick their head for the light in a tunnel. They never cross over. What inspired me about this speech was the facts. It's recorded with evidence in 2004 in the Supreme Court examination. I gave 90% of my money away, more than $72 million to people around me, with solid evidence. I was the only one telling the truth in the court case. And the court case was thrown out except for 120 grand. So therefore, everybody can read what the foundings are and what the judgments were in that Supreme Court examination. Why I'm saying this is because it pays to know things like this. I can absolutely concur with exactly what Will Smith says, because I've been there, and I got there a very long time ago. I remember sitting down and telling my own wife and a couple of friends, you know, I've done every single thing I ever wanted to do and everything I ever dreamed about when it comes to living life, right? Doing the things I want, making the money I did, and achieved every single thing. Look, I'm not saying this to put tickets myself, but just think about it. I came from the underground world. I was a junkie. I was rejected. I left school at 12. Okay? I watched half my mates die on heroin, 3 died my arms, and I flatlined myself at 18 years old with a drug overdose. I was a zero. I was a nobody. And I learned every single thing from a very hard walk of life, being rejected as a freak of nature, getting picked on at school every day, left the school at 12 years old, sit in the bush for 6 months, get picked on the streets every day, take drugs to numb myself because I can't cope, in stress, fear and anxiety, riddled with it, panic and anxiety. Then I flatlined myself at 18 years old, walk around like a zombie for a week, started to worry more about my drug habit and dying, and I had a care factor for life, just life itself. And I hung on. I went from 74 kilos to 51 kilos, and I was half dead. I was on methadone while everyone was on heroin, and I couldn't get off the shit. I went to the doctors, they couldn't help me. And I was in dire straits. My body organs were shutting down. I knew I was dying. I knew I was in a putrid way when it comes to being a junkie, and I was destroying myself. And after flatlining, all I cared about was getting off drugs and trying to get off drugs from that moment, but I couldn't. I was that addicted, it was that bad. Whew. But reality says, I had an accident right just before I was 21, got hit by a drunk driver. A terrible accident, 100 miles an hour. And I was stationary. I was never home because I was a junkie. I was ashamed. And that day, I didn't get a scratch. The other people in the car, the other car was mutilated, right? Life-threatening injuries and permanent damage for the rest of life in wheelchairs. They were really bashed up and lucky to live. I went home and sat in my bedroom for 3.5 weeks. And I was absolutely in shock and high as a kite for 3 weeks. 3.5 weeks in my bedroom, staring into space. Never took drugs ever again. Got married, had 2 kids, couldn't hold a job down. Then I started to buy and sell cars. XY GT is the most collectible car in Australia, and parts. And I became an absolute entrepreneur, right, from my own backyard. Number 1, with XY's, GT's parts, obsolete parts are the most well-known. Created more reputation by word of mouth, as honesty being the best policy, okay? And believe me, my reputation spread across the country, right? I grew up in a neighborhood where all the people in my neighborhood became some of the biggest kings in the underground world and the biker kings, okay? I stamped an engine number in such a way that one car, right, won a top trophy and wasn't even original. Perfect, okay? I went on a mastermind report by the authorities when they did an engine number check and found out I did the engine number perfect and it couldn't be detected 5 years later with an x-ray machine. And I went on a mastermind report for that reason. RSVP, Research Subsidiary Perfection. I was on the front page of the papers King Boss in 1992 at 32 years old and 17 current affairs shows in 1994 at the age of 33. A mastermind of loopholes of laws and a mastermind manipulation. I could unravel things. I became the most wanted in the underground world when we made methamphetamine, made laboratory correct, that took the highest dead time hair, cocaine and violence downs in 30 years, and gang violence and domestic violence where kids got taken up the parents. I went in home to get raped and bashed and became prison produce later. And that caused the Royal Commission paying for 23 years for taking kids off homes to get raped and bashed and becomes prison produce later. So they've been paying out for 23 years. And when you see the kind of people that rape your kids, it shocks you. And then you go to jail yourself after doing all this. Okay? You go to jail for corruption and your arresting officer commends you on his affidavit and retires the police force and tells them in the second mention they don't have the evidence. I'm set up for the evidence. And these are facts. And that's why he retires with many others. And they also had to forced to apologise for the stolen back generation being paid out $250 billion today. And the biggest mental health research ever conducted with Jeremy Griffiths, who wrote the book Freedom, the Cure, Human Condition is Going to Save You Money, and DNA study ever done by the top scholars in the world when they found our DNA from the Star Champion Quarry. And I'm the gatekeeper, number 1 most wanted, with my product, manna, red manna in the Bible, that Christ is most used by a plant called Mayo, on every testing centre across Australia that brought people back in their primal state. You see in the movie Limitless, okay, where you have a universal language and get all your abilities about, because a drug is only a mind manipulation drug that recreates the second secretion you conduct with, right, in your natural abilities. And when you learn these things, I go to jail for corruption, and in jail, it's reported in the Supreme Court examination, I gave 90% of my money away, $72 million. I go into the biggest mental health research, and they find the cure of the human condition is going to save you money in my DNA in 2008 with our drugs on the streets and people coming into jail. And then they found our DNA and the people that were brought back in the primal state, right, which was everybody in the underground world. So in the DNA study done with my product across the whole country, they got people in prison that was on this drug across the whole nation in every single prison system across Australia. And testing centres in every testing centre in 385 testing centres. And the results from DNA studies done is phenomenal. And I do mean phenomenal. So far beyond the mind, they cannot contain this because the secret's out. We're under mind control, trapped in their mind with their personality in mentality. And we find real freedom and the real crossover with the book Freedom, written by Jeremy Givers, held by 16,000 top scholars in the world, the holy grail of life. We can do what Christ can and more in our DNA. And I'm solid, living evidence as primordial being number one in the biggest study we've done for 34 years and 16 years of DNA study. I brought someone back to life with peer reports and CCTV in 1992, 33 years ago. Kirsteen Lashley, Ipswich Hospital. Okay, she wrote the most powerful poem in 2003, The One and Only. Worldwide number one for 8 months. It's powerful. And that's because I'm the one and only in every single study done released in February 2016. 2016. I'm primordial being number one in the top study done by the biggest think tank, biggest mental health research, and biggest DNA study ever done. That means I am who I am, no matter what. I brought people back to life because I harness the power. Do you know what kind of power it takes? Do you actually have any comprehension at all what kind of power it takes to restart someone's heart and their body lifts 8 inches off the bed from one end to the other? Boomfa! On CCTV with 7 peer reports. Do you understand the kind of power it takes to bring someone back to life 3 times like this? Do you understand the kind of power you harness? I don't think you do. But Christ had that harness power. He could command nature. He had the divine power to command nature. And I have the God-given gift and brought into the world like this with that kind of power. No matter how you feel about it. Record it with solid evidence. CCTV, right? Peer reports, DNA study done, and the biggest mental health research about connecting global history. So I can save humanity. And that's the obvious. Because I can do what Christ can and more, no matter how you look at it. We're the most powerful confirmation on earth, more powerful than Christ himself. And that's reality, my boy. That's the reality. So it's obvious that I was naturally selected when I come into this world to save humanity. Because I'm the only one that can. I teach the resurrection and protect the elect with the correct tools to go back into primal state, to do what Christ can and more. And it's not a joke, it's reality. But most people trap them themselves so bad, they'll never have the opportunity to ever know. And I find it astonishing that so many people worldwide rejects the most powerful confirmation on earth. Because I'm living solid evidence right here today. I'm not a myth. I'm not a story. I'm real. I'm genuine. I'm down to earth. And people think there's something wrong with me. Are you kidding me? I bring people through this and been doing it right from the Star Chamber inquiry with 105 people arrested. They knew then, in 1999, in the biggest Star Chamber inquiry, by the biggest think tank in the world, right, by the Federal Police and the National Crime Authority. And my arresting officer commends me. And he told me straight to my face, with many cops that retired, that said, Kim, we know you have an angel watching over you. We're the most powerful confirmation under the mastermind reports. And when we got you on direction microphones, and you could feel the truth and see the truth in the courtroom when we put pen to paper, it blew our mind away. That you can do all these things. You decide laboratory glass that no scientist in the world ever thought of, that took a 14-hour process down to 3.5. No one ever thought of. You decide an engine number so the X-ray machine could not detect it. You're the biggest mastermind on 17 current affairs shows. You unravel every single thing. You've proved to us that you're someone very special. And Kim, this is my arresting officer, Craig Duran, who had a personal relationship with me and retired the police force and stands on my side in my second mention, and said he knew me better than anyone did. He was watching me for 10 years, and when he saw the work plummet in every police station across the country and what we did, he knew I created the atmosphere and stopped all the gang violence, murder rates, mental disorders, defects, and domestic violence, where kids didn't get taken off the parents to go into homes and become prison prostitutes later, to the lowest statistics he's ever seen across every police station across the country. And he knew it was my drug, manna, the most powerful enlightenment drug and love drug in the world, on every testing center, because I was under major investigation for creating the drug. And it's all about the drug. And what do we prove? The truth. The real truth. With the drug that Christ and Moses used to bring people back in the primal state, being suppressed from us. You know, and it comes from a plant called mayam. Meth and amphetamine laid laboratorily correct from the right products is the most powerful love drug, enlightenment drug, and truth serum in the world, because it activates all your perceptions, multiple perceptions with a multiple layer, and dimensional thinking, remote viewing, mental telepathy, ESP, telekinesis, okay, folding space and time with deja vu, where you can see the future and prevent what's going to happen, and use 100% of your brain instead of being trapped inside your mind and only use 7 to 15%. Imagine crossing over and having these abilities where you're high as a kite on the most powerful truth serum in the world that you create with your sacred secretion, adrenochrome, oxidizing your blood with the full-on meth effect, DMT, MDMA, ecstasy feeling, the love pouring all over you, high as a kite, and nothing in the world can ever deceive you again. Never confused, never frustrated, no more stress, fear, and anxiety, free from every single thing you suffer, and no more death experience for 1,000 years to create heaven and earth with sevenfold wisdom and knowledge. You're going to tell me you don't want some of that? Because we're living it. And people are crossing over that wants to go back in the primal state, back in the innocence. So they have the God-given gift and the God-given power, the divine power to command nature.